Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the last optional Forex show for 2021. Let me share my screen. Yeah, okay. Right. So today is the last show of the optional Forex, uh, and I have no intention to actually continue the show next year. Uh, Mainly because my schedule is quite packed next year. So I intend to actually end the show this year, with a good presentation. Yeah. So for the most of my show, I've actually deliberately avoided presenting most of what I tested in a strategy context. Yeah, because I really want to focus on what each indicator can do. Yeah. So, but for the end of this show, I'm actually going to, because it's the last show, so I'm just going to give, I suppose, everyone a gift of sorts. Yeah. Just want to show you all that, again, my philosophy of playing with indicators, and my philosophy of believing that each indicator, the same indicators, if you designate them in different roles while using the same indicator, it can have different effects and it can give you pretty good results altogether. Yeah. So today I'm going to present an indicator which I presented before, which is the price action indicator. Let me see. Yeah. So it will be this particular indicator over here that if any of you actually had downloaded before, you'll be the pattern recognition master. I think I presented this back in October or something. So if you recall, back then I tested a few price action that's contained within this indicator. So I think my screen is a bit, yeah. So the results at then actually wasn't bad. So we got a shooting star or hammer. Some of you would know them as high test, low test bar. With or without trend, with trend filter and without trend filter, the results both come back positive. Then the engulfing body, not the engulfing bar, but engulfing body. Yeah, strangely speaking, I've rarely encountered any price action indicator which marks engulfing just as engulfing body. Usually, it goes for the traditional uh, designation, which is the actual engulfing bar. But this one is actually engulfing body. With and without trend filter, you can see that both come back as profitable. Then, of course, the dark cloud piercing, uh, which to me wasn't as good. Yeah. So for the purpose of today's presentation, which I really want to meant it as a gift to every one of you, is that I'm gonna. What I personally like to trade is just engulfing body and shooting star hammer test bar. I really like to trade these two. And back then when I presented this two testing as such, I really present it as just a entry. The role that I designate for most of what I've done, the testing that I've done for this show, I designate them as entry. Yeah, it's only the last few ones, which is like the HMA trend, super trend, taken what's the name? Sorry, TS. I forgot the full name for it. That's really the Ichimoku part. I designate them as for trend filter. Yeah, but the vast majority that is from the past, I designate them as a entry filter. Now, today, with the same indicator, the pattern recognition, I'm going to use that both as a trend filter, meant for direction, and a entry filter. And I am very, very satisfied with the results. So you can actually go to the same YouTube page, sorry, not YouTube page, but it's my same Google Sheet, under price action, scroll it all the way to the right. I've done this test. Sorry, should remove that with all 29 pairs. Alright, all 29 pairs. Usually I only do it for 10 or 13 pairs, but for the purpose of today's last show, I've done it for all 29 pairs, going back all the way to 2020 January, testing till now. So it's almost a 2-year testing period, and this is the result I got. So same thing, either for a 2-hour wind, stop loss will be 1R, or 4-hour wind, and my stop loss will be still 1R, 1% stop loss, right? So 2% win or 4% win. And the results I've gotten, right? If you go for the 2% win. The win rate is at about 51%. If you go for the 4% win, the win rate is about 34%. So 51 compared to 34. I give you two sides of the story. Then of course, if you go for a 3% win, a 3R, it'll be somewhere in between. I suspect it'll be 42. Yeah. So I'm going to present this as a strategy, not just as an entry, not just as a trend filter, as a strategy. Now, this is something that you possibly can use. It's entirely your choice. Again, if you decide to use this in the way which I've tested, I will highly emphasize for you to actually do your own testing and verify whether you have about the same result as mine. So for 2 years worth of testing, first thing you realize that actually I don't have much trades. I'm going to tell you why later. And out of 2 years, for the 2R win, it's still a really good 200% increment of your account size. For the 4R, 4% gain, it'll be a fantastic 268% gain. Now, I actually expect a 4% gain to be nearly 300%. Yeah, but since it didn't give me 300%, it's only about 50%, and the win rate is actually only about 33%. For any of you out there who's interested, I will actually suggest you to go for a 2R win instead. Yeah, this makes more sense to me rather than the 4R. At the 4R, the win rate is my usual win rate, 38%, but the gain is somewhat disappointing. It's not as high as what I would hope. So in lieu of that, again, I emphasize any of you who is watching this show, I'd rather you go for the 2R win with a 51%, 50% win rate. That makes more sense. Yeah. So without further ado, I will actually jump straight into the strategy. Now, really, I'm going to use the same indicator. There's no other indicator on my screen. I'm going to use it as a trend filter with just the test bar, or some of you know it as a hammer, and engulfing bar on the weekly time frame. Okay, the trend filter is actually on the weekly time frame, and the entry is also based on H4. Right. So look for the price action on weekly, jump down to H4 and trade with the same price action. And there's only two price action: engulfing and the hammer. Test bar, engulfing and the test bar. On the weekly time frame, jump down to trade both the engulfing and the test bar on the H4. That's it. That's the simplest one. Okay. So I'm going to show you how I actually did it and see. Please go and test it if you're interested and see whether you can actually replicate my results. So the first thing is, let's go down to weekly time frame. So you can see that weekly time frame, as long as the indicator actually highlighted as a test bar, test bar, test bar, engulfing bar. And what we're going to do is that for the following week, we're just going to jump down to H4 and see if there is also a test bar or a hammer. That's all we need to spot. That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you're going to go short, just make sure that when the price action happens, is lower than the previous price action. Okay, so really I'm just using price action as sort of a cyclicity. So if there's a hammer that happens here, trade it. If there's an engulfing that happens here, trade it. Let's go for short. So the first example you can see here that on my weekly time frame, it was highlighted as a test bar. Then the following week, we are just looking to go short. That's what we are looking for. Sorry, it should be this bar. Yeah, so you can see that this was highlighted as a high test bar. And the following week, we are just going to look for opportunities to go short. So let's go to the H4 time frame. That's it. So you can see that this was circled, and this was highlighted. So obviously, if you actually enter any of this, this would be a stop loss. No denying. Let's go for the next example. So you can see that the previous week this was highlighted as I think also a test bar. Then now we have a engulfing, which is higher than the previous indicated price action. Jump in and trade. I think this one will actually nail me a 2R win. No, this was a 2-hour wick. This was a stop loss due to this long tail bar. Against this on the weekly time frame was a high test bar, I believe. So over here we'll be looking for a short. So when this happened, it is actually lower than the previous highlighted price action. So we are going for a short. This is all I'm testing. Go for a short, stop loss at a high. So this one easily would nail you a 4% 4-hour win. That's all I'm doing. That's how I tested. And I'm going to remind you again, it actually gives me a very, very respectable, turned out to be a very respectable strategy. So this will be the first time I actually present this as a strategy. Yeah. Going to go through more examples. Let's go for cat Swiss. Right. So now, while doing back testing of this strategy, okay, I actually did trade a variation of this, and I'm going to tell you how I actually trade it on my own. So this is like a free strategy of sorts. There is one way to actually jack up the win rate. There is one way to jack up the win rate. And it's actually a very, very obvious way. Okay, I'm not going to outrightly tell you the answer, but I'm going to show it to you on the weekly time frame. So you can see that this is on the weekly time frame, this is highlighted as a bearish engulfing bar. So you can see that following week price did go, right? So on the weekly time frame, this is highlighted as a low test bar, and the following week price did go. So you can see that this was highlighted as an engulfing bar, but the following week price actually didn't travel. So you can see that this was highlighted as a high test bar, and the following price did go through, did plunge down. Now, just by visual observation, I'm going to ask you, for those trades that eventually went through, those trades that eventually actually succeeded, my question to you is that, does it make sense to simply just trade a higher high or lower high, or can you actually improve on this method by trading on the closing? That's all I'm going to say. Make a guess and derive your own answer. I'm not going to give you everything, but that's just a huge hint to any of you out there who's actually listening. Right? So I've already given out a lot. I've done all 29 testing, and it come back as a very, very respectable results. If you trust me, do your own testing, download the indicator, and see if you can actually derive somewhat the same result as mine. Better still, if you can improve it. And the way to improve it, I already tell you. You see that when price eventually goes, it usually breaks one of this level. The open, high, low, close. Just by visual observation, which level does it usually break? Then it makes more sense to actually place your trade or start trading when price breaks that particular level. It can be a break, it can be a retest, or simply by trading above or below certain levels. It's just 4 levels, OHLC. Really easy to observe. Do your homework. I'm sure it will net you pretty good results. Alright, Raymond. So if I'm taking the lower high H4 signals, I'm taking the second entry signal. No, not necessarily the second entry signal. Let me just give you, not necessarily the second entry. Yeah, so you can see from here, so I've already highlighted that this I should go short on this week, because on the higher time frame, this turns out to be a bearish engulfing bar. You can see that this is a bearish engulfing bar from the previous bar, right? So I'll be trading this candle. So this is actually the first signal of the week from H4. That's the first signal of H4. But this particular signal is lower than the previous bearish signal. So long as it's lower high and you're supposed to go short, that would be a better signal to take. It makes sense, right? If it's a higher one, then if the signal actually appears higher somewhere here compared to the previous signal, possibly price is actually not going lower, it's going higher. So the the direction analysis on the weekly time frame will be voided. Right, so not necessarily the second signal, but the entry signal must be lower than the previous price action signal. That's what I'm saying. It can be the first signal of the week, not necessarily the second signal of the week. Yeah. On top of that, like just now, the huge hint which I've given to you is that, look, the previous week also have the opened OHLC levels. If you actually done your fair share of work, you will actually realize that the vast majority of the winning signals will appear after a certain level. I'm not going to give that outright. Derive your own answer. And this will actually turn out to be a pretty good trading strategy. Yeah, I'm not going to hide it. I'm telling you all that this is an actual trading strategy. I do employ it myself with a little bit of changes. Final. Look, all the sharings that I have is on my optional Forex show. I think Mai has been sharing the link to my Google Drive. I think she has shared previously. And Mai, if you can actually share it one more time, thank you. All the indicators I've tested is in this folder. You can download them. None of it is mine. You want to distribute it, because none of it is mine. Yeah, I'm also a what do you call it? Indicator scalper. I go all around the web finding different indicators that's up. And the result is in this Google Sheet, which is what I'm showing you all. So just if you want to know the results, go to price action tab and look at the results. Yeah, I give a brief introduction, a brief highlight of how I actually tested it. Right, it's just 5 lines. I've used most of my testing is done using market entry. Stop loss is usually at the high or low of the bar. Should be pretty easy to understand. Alright. Any questions that you all have? I'm surprised that none of you actually asked me much question, because I actually deliberated quite a fair bit with whether should I present this or not. Because for the better part of the year, I actually avoided presenting any strategy of sorts. Yeah, so this will actually be the first time I presented an actual strategy. Yeah, because due to the trend filter, which is the price action I've taken from the weekly time frame, that will explain why I actually have so little trades. I mean, it's a weekly bar, doesn't meant to have a lot of trades. Yeah. So for about 2 years, you can see that January 2020 to about now, December, it still generated a respectable returns. Actually, I would say more than respectable. In fact, I will go down to say that for any of you who are watching this current show, I will bet my bottom dollar that the results generated here is actually more than what you have earned in your own trading. That's a huge claim, I know. Right. At the same time, because it's the trend analysis is based on a weekly chart, the effort to take to actually monitor the trades are very, very minimal. Yeah, I'm not using any sort of trailing stops. It's just market entry, take profit level, that's all. Right. I love simplicity for trading. I'm not one who overthink my trades. Alright, so again, I'll just recap the entire way of how I actually look at it. On the weekly chart, as long as the indicator indicates that there's a engulfing bar, there's a test bar, there's an engulfing bar, there's a test bar, whichever that is, that means the following week we are looking to trade in the direction of what the price action indicator indicates. Okay, that's the first criteria. Right, so get engulfing bar, following week we are looking to trade short. Bearish engulfing, trade short. Just go down, whack down all the way to H4 and wait for it. Oh, sorry, that's a bit messy. There you can see once a signal appears, just make sure that the signal that appears is slower than the previous signal. you may trade it. And if you feel that you want to push up the win rate, for long, make sure that you trade above a certain level. For short, make sure you trade below a certain level. What is that level? I've given you a huge hint. OHLC, one of them. That's all you need to know. Or rather, that's the part that you need to do your own homework. What's the fun if I give everything away? Do a bit of homework. It's gonna be fun. You will learn more in depth about the strategy if you do your own manual backtesting. You will almost always certainly learn more about it. Raymond, once I'm on a H4 trade, a second H4, no, one trade a week. Oh yeah, you reminded me. One trade a week. Yeah, I only take one trade a week. If the first signal is a stop loss, that's it. Game over. There's no second trade. Unless the following week, on the weekly time frame, it indicates another trade. Then yes, I'll go for it. Yeah. I'm a self-professed lazy trader. You won't find anything complicated presented by me. I'm a lazy trader, but efficient because I make profits. So that's the whole aim of the show. A strategy can be very, very simple. The complicated thing is always the human psychology. Right? One last thing. Since it's a market, sorry, two last things. Since it's a market entry, there's no expiry. Because once there's a signal, we are straight away into it. Now, there's not a common scenario. I don't know whether I can find it here. I should really prepare it beforehand. Let me see. It has it. Doesn't seem that I can. It has it now. Now there will be cases, right? There will be sometimes it's not here. I can't find. There will be sometimes whereby you can see that there are actually two signals. That means there's a yellow dot above and there's a yellow dot below and there's a yellow dot above. Yeah, it can happen on a weekly. It can also happen on the H4. I will ignore those. I will just interpret those as it is meaningless to trade. It's not indecisive, it's just meaningless. Yeah, when would it happen? And why would it happen? It can be such that, let's say for this particular candle over here, let's say for this. So this is actually a high test bar, right? So sometimes a high test bar, the body can be huge enough to actually cover the previous bar. Then it may come out as both a high test and engulfing bar, especially if it's a green body. Then you can see that the signal actually appears on both sides. For those particular signal, I will ignore. Yeah, so that's the only thing that I will ignore. It can happen both on the weekly or the H4. That's the one time I will not place. I did test those. I won't place any trade. Other than that, I suppose most of the things should be pretty clear cuts. Okay. So for the ease of you, any of you who are looking to find the indicator, I've always put it. The past indicators is in the indicators folder. The latest one will always be the one outside, which is this one, pattern recognition master. So I just make it easier for you to find. Yeah, but again, if you want to look at the past, yeah, just look at the past. It's all in there. All right. So with this, I would thank you all for joining me for the better part of this journey. I'm glad to have a solid base of listeners. Not much, but solid base. I always see the same name. All right. This will, as I mentioned, this will be the last of 2021 show. Then, don't think I will actually continue for next year, or at least not for the first 6 months. Yeah, rather tied up. But I'm happy to actually present anything if I find interesting. Yeah, I might come back in a different formats. Yeah, because I always find that traders like to complicate things. I'm out here to actually debunk that. Trading need not be complicated. It can be very, very easy. Yeah. All right, Raymond. In my opinion, what is your preference with this weekly H4 method versus the H4 crossover strategy? Both has its pros and cons. If any of you who actually been taught by me, you know that most of my strategy, my win rate is over between 30 to 40%. Yeah, so same for this, you can see that the 4-hour win rate is also hovering between that 33%. I don't know, I seem to, yeah. Rare that anything I presented which is profitable is over 50%. This happens to be one of those times. And I also recommend you to go for the 2:1 win rate, 51%. That makes more sense to do. Yeah, because not as if the lower win rate translate to way higher winners. I mean, this is only probably about what, 54% gains, so it does not justify the lower win rate. Yeah, so for this particular which I presented, I'd rather you go for the 2:1. Yeah, so if you want my opinions, I think you can trade this, but go for the 2:1. Yeah, it should add into, it should easily, this will actually easily complement any of the strategies you are trading at hand. Yeah. But again, I'm going to emphasize, for those of you who are holding a prop firm account, respect the prop firm rules, right? Especially for those of you who are ATW students. You're not allowed to actually trade any strategies that is not being taught by the owners, the leaders. So if you're going to use this, use it at a personal account. That's what I'm saying, right? And of course, test it. All right, with that, thank you. If we have a chance, I would love to meet all of you. Otherwise, have a good Christmas ahead. Goodbye.